Hi everyone, this is Gary. Recently I created an image for this Photoshop class that I teach, and it's kind of cool and kind of fun, but the thing is, it's way easier to do than it looks. So I got a couple questions about it, and the thing is, I shot it using a white seamless background, this vinyl background. It's kind of an expensive background. I used vinyl because it turns out vinyl is easy to clean as opposed to paper. And, I used a beauty dish and a studio strobe, so I used some expensive gear, and that sends a wrong message because it isn't about the gear. It's really just about, putting your camera on a tripod and making sure it doesn't move for all three shots, because you're combining three shots together, which you can easily do in Photoshop Elements or Photoshop using layers. So I wanted to show you how easy it is to actually shoot it, and I'm going to use much less expensive gear. Now, yes, I do have some extra stuff here. I've got this speed light. This is a Yongnuo 560-2. It's $70. I mean, for a speed light that has this much output, that's an amazingly inexpensive flash. And it's a good flash. I've tested it out, and it's really good. It's fully manual. It doesn't do any of the TTL metering where it gets its output based on the camera's exposure and automatically balances ambient to the flash, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't do any of that. You have to, understand manual exposure and then understand how to adjust your flash and get the right flash output. But it's not all that hard. It's not all that hard, honestly. At any rate, so the flash is being triggered by a radio transmitter and a receiver, and those two items are $25 for the both of them. Here's a bracket which holds the flash plus an umbrella, and the bracket is actually a little bit expensive. It was like $22, but I had bought a cheaper bracket for like $9, and it was made out of plastic, and just being in my camera bag, without even using it, it broke. So this is a good one, $22. And this is a bounce umbrella. The flash is shooting into the umbrella, and the umbrella spreads the light, creating this nice, large, soft light source, as opposed to a small, hard light source. And if you do this shot, you don't have to use this. You could just set your camera on a tripod and take 3 shots. So let me just talk about the camera a little bit. Basically, I had set an exposure whereby I'm almost getting a black frame. So I'm at f4 at a 60th of a second, ISO 200. So at that setting, and let me just take a picture at that setting so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so there's a little bit of light spill from this window that's off camera, but essentially it's about 3 stops underexposed. So basically, once I got an ambient exposure, I turned on my flash and set it to a quarter power, which is almost what I always do to start off with. No reason, and it worked. I mean, that was at ISO 200, f4, that was the right output. So I just got lucky. If it wasn't right, if it was too dark, I would have increased the output, taken another frame. If it was too bright, I would have decreased the output and taken another frame. This flash will increment in third stop, so it's very handy. It's a great flash for the money. Right, so the things you have to understand about a flash versus your camera's exposure setting. Well, f4 and the ISO of 200 are the only things that are impacting on the flash. My shutter speed has nothing whatsoever to do with the flash. What I mean by that is, obviously my shutter speed is affecting my ambient exposure. If I wanted to let in more ambient light, I would slow down my shutter. It's at 1/60th because I actually want the flash to do most of the heavy lifting, i.e. light the scene. If I wanted more ambient light in the scene, and if there was a reason to add more ambient light, I certainly would, but it's just not good light. So I don't see any benefit to increasing my ambient light. So I would slow down the flash if I did want to increase the ambient influence on the scene to create more ambient light. That would not affect the flash because the flash's output is much faster than the shutter speed. This flash at 1/4 of a power is faster than 1/1000th of a second. So, you know, the rule of thumb is if you want to change the flash's output from the camera, you do that by adjusting the f-stop. Because opening and closing my shutter, my aperture will influence how bright the flash appears in the frame. Opening and closing my shutter will increase the ambient light or decrease the ambient light. So the rule of thumb is shutter for ambient light and aperture for flash plus ambient. I hope that's clear. It's not as confusing as I'm probably making it sound. It's actually really simple. At any rate, I've got the proper exposure, so without further ado, I'm going to turn on the flash, and I'm going to set my camera's timer to 10 seconds. That gives me enough time to get over. So here I go. I'm going to push the shutter. I got 10 seconds to get over here. All right, I'm going to use this magnifying glass as a prop. Okay, 2 more shots I have to take. I'm going to push the shutter. Okay, 1 more shot. Push the shutter. Get into position. Okay, so that's really it. So yeah, the bottom line is, like I said, you don't need this flash rig to do this. You just need to have your camera on a tripod and make sure it doesn't move. Because if it doesn't move, when you bring in these 3 different images as layers in Photoshop, the background will be exactly in the same spot. That's called pin registering. In other words, you overlay these images and the background is in the exact same, down to the pixel, the exact same spot in each photograph. That makes it really super easy to bring in these various versions of me. I mean, this whole thing is going to take less than 5 minutes. So let's just pop over to Photoshop and I'll show you. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. I've already brought in all 3 images on their own layer, but let me just show you very quickly how you would do that. And by the way, it's the same in Elements. Photoshop has arrayed these files in new tabs. I have 3 tabs. 1, 2, 3. Simply going to grab my Move tool, drag up to the first Images tab, and then drag down and hold down the Shift key. That adds that image to the first file on its own layer, perfectly registered with the image directly below it. Since I've already done it, I'm not going to do it again. So you would just do that for all 3 images. It's really that simple. All right, so I've got these images. I'm going to start working from left to right. And so I'll turn off the top image. Let's just work on the middle image, which is the one I just turned off. The middle image is with me in the middle. First step, if I click on the Add Layer Mask icon, I get a layer mask added, but it's white, meaning everything is being revealed on that layer. So let me undo that by going Command or Control Z. And this time I will hold down the Alt key and click on the Add Layer Mask icon. That layer comes in filled with black, concealing everything on that layer. So even though I'm turning off and on this layer, it makes no difference because the layer's pixels are completely concealed or masked by the layer mask, such is the nature of a layer mask. Okay, so I'm going to grab a brush, making sure my layer mask is active and not the image. See, if I click on the image, a white frame comes around it. If I click on the layer mask, it has a white frame. That tells me it's active. I'm going to paint with white with a brush. I'll make my brush bigger by holding my white key, my right bracket key. Now, I know I'm somewhere here in the middle of the image, so all I have to do is paint myself in. And this is super easy. Look at that. Look at how easy that is. Okay, done with that. What did that take? 3 seconds? Okay, so at this juncture, though, I want to point something out, okay? I shot at f4, and that was a mistake, because look at how my hand is blurry. That's because it's outside the depth of field, right? That's just a bad shooting, folks. All right, anyway, I got to live with this. So that's that. All right, so let's turn on, let me zoom out, and we'll turn on the top layer. Okay. All right, turn on the top layer. Same deal. Activate that layer, hold down the Alt key, click on the Add Layer mask icon. We now have a layer mask. I'm going to paint with white. Here I am. Oh, look at that. The wall. Wow. That's interesting. One might think that I changed my exposure, but I did not. Okay, at any rate, I'm working from right to left, so I got some issues down here, which I'm going to have to deal with somehow. So let me start with the leg area. So I'm going to make my brush a lot smaller and be very careful how I do this, because I don't want to, ruin the effect, as it were. Okay. All right. Okay, so here I go. I'm just, here's my vest. Got to be careful. Okay. All right, now this kind of looks like a shadow to me, and that's probably how it would look. Actually, be more like this. What I'm going to do is make my foreground color white, make my brush a lot bigger, because I have a soft edge on this brush, and I'm going to change its opacity to about 50%. So what I'm going to do is try and fake a shadow like this. Maybe make it a little smaller and get my knee in there a little better. Okay, make my foreground color black. I'm not liking what's going on here. Okay. All right, I think that would be a softer shadow. So I'm going to make my foreground color white and take another pass with 50% opacity. Okay, actually, that looks pretty good. All right, I'm happy with that. I can deal with that. All right, so back to 100% opacity. I'm going to paint in my arm, and then I have this issue over here, up top here. So the pillow would be in shadow, so let me bring that pillow back. And now I'm going to make my brush really small and see if I can somehow make this look realistic. Okay. All right. Okay, let me get in really tight, make my brush even smaller. Now, I don't know if you can see it on, and I'm in really tight, so I'm in at like almost 350%, but you can see at ISO 200 that there's some noise, but it's not bad at all. We're not going to be zooming in this close at all. Now I shot with a Canon Canon 5D Mark II. It doesn't do a great job with higher ISOs, but it's not bad. The Mark III does a much better job, but I can't afford that one, so there you go. Anyway, okay, so that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to zoom out, see if this is convincing. Okay, just two more things. I don't like this coffee table at the bottom here, so I'm going to take my crop tool and holding down my shift key to keep the proportional integrity correct, I'm just going to drag up like so, and then hit the checkbox, and then lastly add a warming filter because I don't really like the it's just a little too cool, and actually the warming filter right out of the box is perfect, so that is that, and we're done. Okay.